live across the road from your grandparents?
From
then?
my grandparents. Well, at one time.
Okay.
And again, this is a lot of changes that happened. But I think, yeah, in the very beginning, before I remember it all, Irma's brother and family lived there. And they had 4 children. This would be Earl and Hulda Plambeck. And he died from scarlet fever and left her with 4 very young children to raise. And so she moved home to live with her father. And that's probably about the time that George and Irma then got married and they moved in there. Probably. That I don't know. I'm not sure about that.
Did the Nenesers live over there at some point?
That comes a little later.
Okay.
Art and Laura lived where Doug lived first,
Okay.
I think. That I don't remember. I'm just basing it on what I
That's
heard.
fine.
And then at one point, I don't know if George couldn't make it farming or what, but they moved to Illinois. And I think that's when Art and Laura and Ab and Jean moved on to that place.
Okay. And again, for clarity's sake, when you say where Doug lived, you're talking about the place down the road from Wanda
Yes,
Church.
yes.
Okay.
Where's Wanda Church located?
Wanda Avenue.
See what you get?
So if I'm not from Nebraska,
Halfway between, right in the middle of Juniata, Roseland, Kennesaw, Holstein. How's that? When I was in high school, people would say, "Where do you live?" And I'd say, "Well, my address is Juniata, my phone is Roseland, and I go to school in Holstein. You figure it out."
okay.
Okay. It was quite a house. It was built by Pete Einspire, who was my uncle-in-law's father, and had 19 kids. It's a big house.
Yeah.
But it was kind of built in a style that would have accommodated a bathroom, which we didn't have in those days. Well, Grandma and Grandpa Shuckeye had one. And, you know, more of the things, innovative things that came later in years. Well, I'm going back to Grandma and Grandpa Shookeye's bathroom. I don't know if they had it right from the beginning, but they had it for as long as I can remember. There was a bathroom, and they had running water. They did not have hot running water. The hot water heater was a big tank that stood next to the cook stove in the kitchen. And however much it heated the water, I guess, that's the way I remember it anyway.
Okay.
But there was a stool and a tub and a sink.
They had water pressure. I know you don't know the engineering behind this, but they apparently had water pressure somewhere. It wasn't just pumps like.
No, it wasn't
Okay.
pumps. Not my first memories anyway. Were not pumps in that house. No. They had electricity long before a lot of places, and I don't know the reason for it. You know, we just lived like a mile around the corner later, and the only thing I could figure out is that the Second World War started and everything had to go for war effort, and they stopped everything. But I don't know if that's a fact or not, because we didn't get it then around the corner till 48, I think. 47, 48. I think 48 or so.
At what point did you leave the big house and move around the corner?
When my mom got pregnant with Raj.
Okay. Ask about church.
Okay.
About you know, just the life in the church at that time. What Sunday
Carbide
service
lights.
was like. What
Oh.
you know, other get-togethers were like. Yeah, the physical properties of
There
the
was
church.
no electricity there either.
And you had to have some strong guys upstairs pumping that organ.
Oh yeah, the organ pump. Oh yeah. That was a teenager's job, the teenage boy's job, to pump that organ. And if you slumped on the job, the organ would go, you know, while somebody's trying to play it.
Were you growing up at the time when it was Still the men on one side and the women on the other?
I think when I was real little, I remember a little bit of that. Yeah, not much, and it wasn't for long because that ended then for most couples. Some couples stayed at it a longer time, and it just was something they had trouble giving up. And don't ask me why it was that way.
That's where I was going next.
Well, I remember my mom saying that my grandma said, yeah, she says, we sit over there with the kids and he sits over there like God himself, So that's what my mom said about that grandma said. So, but I don't know why or how that got started even. What the rationale behind it was, well, I know, way back in the German times, women were still very subservient. My first teacher, I don't remember my first teacher. I went to kindergarten from about Easter on till the end of school, which is only, a matter of weeks. And his name was Lutz, but I don't remember anything about him. My first grade teacher was Verona's brother, my cousin's wife. That's how they met, Art and Verona, when Harold came and taught school there. And he was a very talented guy, music and so on. I don't remember a lot about him, but I do remember him. Don't remember a lot about school.
And was this at Wanda?
At Wanda. How many there were in my grade, I'm not sure. Because there was a family, I know one of the boys was in my grade. His name was Lowell Reeder. And then later they moved to Kearney within a few years. And then there was myself and Ruth Blessane. Leon Nienheiser. Or was he in a grade ahead? I don't know. There were a number of families still in the area at that time that within a few years moved away and had kids in school. But I just don't, being in the first grade, I don't remember exactly what grade they were in. I know I went to school with them for a short time. Leon was either in my grade or a grade ahead.
Can you recall how you dressed when you went to school?
Well, my mom made me wear long brown stockings a lot of the time, and you'd get there and roll them way down, and no, just
And that was with a dress?
yeah, and that was only winter time when it was cold.
The
Because
stockings.
you never wore pants unless it was a snow outfit. I don't remember even having a snow outfit. I don't know.
Talk about how things worked, how the day worked when you had all these different grades in one room with one teacher.
Well, you started off with an hour of religion, and then each class maybe had 5-10 minutes, and it just kind of rotated. And the rest of you are like you were in study hall, in your desks, working, supposedly, while they're right up in front of you teaching the next class. For some people, it was an advantage, because you listened to the next class, and you learned way ahead of your time. For other people, it was probably a distraction. I don't know. And then we would have music every day, and so, you take 8-9 grades, and try to work that in between that hour of religion and that music time, and every class under the sun. Yeah.
Did you get time to go outside and play?
Oh yeah, we had 2 recesses and a noon hour.
Okay. Were there any organized games that you
Yeah,
would play?
we did pump pull away and steel sticks and handy over, and throw the ball over the school, and sides, choose sides, and in the wintertime, fox and goose, and as we got older, then a little more softball and that type of thing. Yeah. Oh, there was another one too. Oh, that was Pum Pum Pulaway, I think. 23 Skidoo, that's what it was. You wound up in jail, and somebody from your side had to come and give you so many pats, and before they got caught, and when you got 23, you were out. 23 Skidoo.
Okay.
And we did that. We did a lot of that up by the church instead of by the school, especially that Pump 23 Skidoo, because those steps were the jail. Those far out steps by the
Yeah.
road.
Okay.
That was the jail, and the steps up by the church, that was a safety place. Yeah, I'd forgotten about that. And then one year, we left our sticks out there when we played steel sticks, and the janitor was an old bachelor who didn't like kids playing around there, and he took them and burned them all.
Oh.
Or we thought he did anyway. We decided he did.
Your lunch to school? You
Yep,
did?
took lunch,
Yeah.
yes, every day. Yep. That got old. I was so glad when I got in high school and had a hot lunch.
What, did you make your lunches, or did Grandma make them for you?
Grandma did it up until I was older anyway. I don't.
What did you drink with the lunches then, if you took them?
We had thermos bottles, and either we had something, milk or something to drink, or hot soup in it, which
Oh.
was nice in the wintertime.
Okay.
What other kinds of things did you have for your lunch?
Sandwiches.
Okay.
It was better than my dad had. He said all he got was fried egg sandwiches, cold fried egg sandwiches.
Wow.
I thought, oh, no, I don't know exactly what, but meat sandwiches of some kind, and then usually one piece of fruit and one cookie or dessert of some kind, and then, like I said, in the wintertime, hot soup sometimes, or hot chocolate, or in the thermos. Started school when we were living in the big white house on Wanda Avenue, and we did carpooling with, well, there were Offenkamps and Jacobitzes. I don't remember who else, but the Blessings didn't. Do you know? Remember where Blessings?
Mhm.
Yeah, okay, up farther. Ruth had to walk. Ruth and Harold had to walk. They didn't get in on the carpool.
And how far would that have been?
A good mile, maybe a little more. I remember once in the 8th grade that by the time Ruth got there, she had frostbite in her hands. And
Was that because of their religion, or just because their parents just felt like walking was better for them, or they just
they
weren't?
just didn't think kids
Part of
needed
the
to ride.
community.
I don't know. I don't know why. That was another case where there was a bachelor uncle that lived with the family, and he drove the car, and it was his car, and I suppose he said, I'm not taking any kids. I don't know. Who knows?
So they just, the
Yeah.
parents didn't have a vehicle at that time.
No. I guess. I think it belonged to him,
For those
because
kids.
he always drove, so I assumed it belonged to him.
And when you were in school, the teacher lived right across the road, right?
If they were married,
Oh.
we only had one married teacher, I think. Okay, if they weren't married, they lived with somebody on the school board. They had to board them. And Verona's brother, my first grade teacher, lived with Art and Laura Nienheiser. Then my 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade teacher was Gene Cruzy, and he lived with the Blessings. Let's see. 6th, 3rd, 4th, 5th grade. Okay, 6th and 7th grade teacher was Alschwady, and that was Delpha Luco's father, Clayton's wife,
Oh.
and he lived in the teacherage. And that was 6th and 7th. And my 8th grade teacher was Audrey, and of course she lived at home. So, and she was the first woman teacher I ever had.
I think it's interesting you had so many men teachers.
Well, that's the way the Lutheran school system worked at
Hmm.
that time mostly. There are a lot of women teachers now, but
Oh,
there
yeah.
weren't many at that. Although there had been a few, back when my dad was in that school, it was a 2-room school because they had 60-some kids then, and they had 2 teachers. And there was always a woman teacher then for the one class. Oh, we had a pastor teach us in the second, when I was in the second grade. Pastor Beckler taught us because they couldn't get a teacher. So,
And by getting a teacher, does that mean it was whomever wanted to do it? Did
no,
they have
it
a
had to do with a
training?
call. It was like calling a pastor in the Lutheran church schools. And you sent out a call, and they could either refuse or accept. Also, we were in the Second World War at that point. And a lot of these guys, if they hadn't finished school, probably had to go into the service. I don't know exactly what happened.
The transition from going to school at Wanda to going to school at Holstein, was that, how much of a transition? What was that like?
It wasn't too bad. I mean, I went from a class of 1 to a class of 12, but a lot of those kids I kind of knew before I went. And some of them I had been riding the bus with, a couple of the girls anyway, and I knew most of them. And when I did my 8th grade exam, we had to come into Hastings and take it at the high school. And I stayed overnight with Grandma and Grandpa Marchand. And I knew the Faber kids. There were 2 of them in my grade. And when they came walking down toward the school, I went out and we went as a group. And so I had visited school at Holstein when Joanne was going. I went with her one day and visited school. And so I knew almost all the kids, had met them anyway in my class. So that wasn't a big transition as far as knowing the kids. I suppose the biggest transition was at Wanda. We had like 5-10 minute classes, and we went to longer classes. But we had study halls too along the way, and several teachers where I just had one teacher at Wanda.
Did they do hot lunches then?
Yes, they did hot lunches. That was a good transition. That one I liked.
Did you have a favorite meal?
Ham salad sandwiches, which weren't hot. But I had...
How about a favorite class or a favorite subject?
English and math classes. I hated history and geography.
What about any extracurriculars? Any after-school activities? Did you do anything?
No, there wasn't much of anything for girls. I think, the guys probably had some basketball, but for girls there wasn't much of anything, no.
17, you're not only getting married, you're leaving home for the first time.
Yes, I was. Our first apartment down in Manhattan, Kansas. Grandma and Grandpa John helped move us down there. And it was a 2-room apartment. There was a bedroom, a hallway, and a kitchen. And at the end of that hallway, there was a door that was wallpapered over. Not completely closed, but had wallpaper on it. Well, we didn't think much about it. And then there was a door at the end of the hall that went outside. That's where we came in and went out. So the first night we're sleeping, and Grandma and Grandpa were still there. I think somebody slept on the floor and somebody in the bed. But in the middle of the night, there's pounding on that door. Pounding. And first, Dad ignored it. Your dad. Finally, he ignored it completely. And all at once, we shared a bathroom with the landlady. There's pounding on the bathroom door. Dad went to the door and she says, "You've got to let those people in. They live upstairs." And we said, "Okay, that's it. We're out of here." And the next day he had to work. And so Grandma and Grandpa and I started looking for an apartment. And we didn't find anything. And they went on home. And I guess we stayed there a couple nights yet, but we kept looking, and then we found a different apartment where we didn't have people going through our hallway in the middle of the night.
How long were you there before you went to Colorado Springs?
Well, he was there quite a while before we were married. We were married in August, and I think it was May when we moved to Colorado Springs then,
How long did you stay in the Springs?
from May to January.
What was that life like? How did that compare to what you've done in Manhattan?
Much better. We got a television set. They had television out there. We had watched television in Manhattan because our friends Buck and Virginia Beaver had a set. They came from St. Louis, so they were used to watching television. There was no station close except Topeka, which meant we watched a lot of snow. But there were a couple programs we watched, snow or not. But when we got to Colorado, there were 2 stations there. And so the first thing we bought when we got there was a television set. That's hard for young kids to imagine, I know.
Oh, yeah. Did you spend your whole time in the Springs at that same place?
Yes, we had a wonderful landlady. As a matter of fact, her daughter then became a professor at Wesleyan. And eventually, Mrs. Daler, the landlady, moved to Lincoln. And every time we'd come down to see you, we would stop to see her too. Almost every time.
Yeah.
And especially when Jody started school, because then we were going to Wesleyan. Yeah.
All right, he gets out of the Army. Then what do you do?
Well, before he gets out of the Army,
Okay.
that's a story too. It's like, okay, what are you going to do? Getting out of the Army, you don't know how to do anything, basically. Well, he had taught school. He decided he didn't want to do that. He had worked at a filling station. He really didn't want to do any more of that. He had cooked. Where do you go? What do you put that together?
Yeah.
Well, he thought maybe he'd farm. So evidently he mentioned something to his folks, and okay, we'll move to town and you move on here and farm. Okay. We were kind of planning that. Well, then suddenly we get a letter. They were looking for a farm for us to rent. So we knew they weren't ready to move to town and quit. And I must have mentioned it to my folks because, now this is a long story too. A farm came up for sale. And Dad bought it. And then decided he couldn't afford it. And he'd been bidding against Walt Felzine, and he went to Walt and said, will you take it? And Walt did. So then Dad started looking for a farm for us to rent. It's a horrible story. You know, without telephone, we didn't have a telephone. We would have to go to a pay phone to call. They couldn't call us. You're trying to correspond by mail, which was faster those days than now, but it was still really hard. So I don't know how his folks felt about it when Dad found this farm to rent. I don't know. But yeah, we rented the farm.
And that's the one south of 74.
It was north of 74, but almost down to 74. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that house.
All right, we'll talk about that house. It was a little square house that was set high because the basement was full and a lot of windows in it. So it was designed that way to be used both stories, both floors. And whoever built it, it was evidently a really nice home in the beginning because in the basement, the main room had oak floors that were all warped and worn, and wood cabinets. That was the kitchen in the beginning. And in one of the rooms, there was a stool, wouldn't flush, but there was a hand pump where you could, at one time, get water, and you could flush the stool with it until the drain was plugged, which was plugged when we moved in. There was a floor drain, too, to do laundry. It was plugged. It was like, and then the other room had a furnace in it. It didn't work either. It was crazy. But upstairs then, what probably had been the dining room, was made into a kitchen, and it had a hand pump for water, and 3 other little rooms. Not a closet in the place. Your dad built a big wardrobe. That's what that house was like. It was a dry-line farm. It was a drought. We didn't raise hardly anything. Dad went to what they called veterans school. They paid him to go to farm school to learn how to farm. basically. And it was enough to, we had chickens, we had a lot of chickens, and we had milk. And with the income from that, we managed. Not well, but we managed. Then this farm came up for sale a couple miles from us, and auction. And Dad went to the auction, and he came home that day, and I said, well, who bought the farm? He says, Otto did. I said, what? Why did he buy a farm? And it worried me, because I figured everybody said, oh yeah, he's buying a farm for those kids. Well, that may have been his intention. I never knew. All I knew was that within a short time, my dad had negotiated with him that we would buy 180, my dad would buy the other 80. And that was where you grew up. So that's how we got started. And then my dad helped with the irrigation well and the pipe and stuff so we could get started irrigating. And of course we paid him rent on his 80, and we made payments on our 80 for a long time. But at least we didn't do it, we did it through a finance company, not directly to Otto, which made me feel better even if nobody else knew that. I didn't want people saying that Otto bought me a farm.
Now, do I remember right? You were just about to pop me when you moved.
I was so close to popping you when we moved. My mom was more concerned with getting drapes up. She was there one day trying to get drapes up on the windows, and I said, Mom, I don't really care. And I didn't want to tell her that I wasn't feeling real well, because I knew, she'd know what was going on. I just said, I'm just tired. I'm tired. I don't care. And I can't tell you the exact day we moved, but it wasn't very long before you came. In connection with moving into that house, there was no water in that house either. And so
did either one of them have electricity?
It had electricity.
How about the first?
Yeah, it had electricity, but no water. So they got busy and started doing a lot of remodeling work and put in cupboards. And I'm sure my dad carried a lot of the financing on a lot of that stuff. And water, got a bathroom, and painted and this and that, put in new windows, and because the windows were all rotten. The people that were living there had been renting for years, and rented houses really get run down. So Grandma and Grandpa John came up too and helped with a lot of it, the painting and this and that, and they wouldn't let me in. At that time, they said, if a pregnant woman smelled paint, and evidently there was something in the paint at that time that could cause early birth or, miscarriages or whatever, but they wouldn't let me come except at noon. I could fix a meal and bring it up there for them to eat, and so that's the way we worked it for a while. I was the cook and they were the carpenters, I guess. I don't know, till it was time to move in.